Hello, welcome to Shakespeare's drama. This audio's objectives. After listening this audio, you will be able to talk about the life and the times of Shakespeare, discuss Shakespeare as a playwright, and write about the sources from which Shakespeare borrowed his material for the play, describe the story of the play, then analyze the events of act of the first the play. Now we go to the introduction. This is the first of the three units devoted to The Merchant of Venice, a play by William Shakespeare. This unit gives you a brief idea about Shakespeare's life and development as a writer. You will have a fairly good idea about the innate greatness of Shakespeare in this unit. You will also learn that Shakespeare has drawn material for his plays from various sources. The Merchant of Venice is no exception in this regard. This unit lists the sources Shakespeare relied on for this particular play. A detailed analysis of the play is given in the first two units. But to follow this analysis, it is essential for you to read the actual play. Any addition with notes will serve your purpose. In order to understand a play, it is essential to read it at least once. So, my sincere advice to you is to read the actual play and then compare your impressions with the analysis given in these units. You can enjoy the beauty and appeal of literature only when you have direct interaction with the original text. My analysis is only a commentary and not a substitute for the text. Let us now know a few essential things about Shakespeare. William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare is considered the supreme literary artist of all time. He was born in Stratford-upon Warwickshire, England, though the exact date of his birth is unknown. Traditionally, it is considered to be April 23, 1564. His father, John Shakespeare, was a trader. Very little is known about Shakespeare's formal education. In 1585, he came to London as an actor and simultaneously began his career as a playwright and poet. His development into a writer during a period of unparalleled intellectual and artistic vigor is a happy coincidence in English literary history. He produced on an average 2 plays a year and acted in a number of them simultaneously. Sometime around 1612, after 20 years of writing and acting for London's foremost acting company, Shakespeare moved back to Stratford. He died on April 23, 1616, and was buried in the chancel of the Holy Trinity Church. Shakespeare as a playwright. It is difficult to give an account of Shakespeare's development as a playwright. Unlike the works of most other dramatists, his plays do not follow one another in logical progression. Also, we must not assume that the story of the poet's growth will explain his achievements with reference to his personal predilections, because his inspiration was not his private experience but that of all mankind. Probably that was what Ben Jonson meant when he said that Shakespeare was for all time. Nevertheless, we can assume that Shakespeare was of an age, the Elizabethan age, in the sense that a great drama is likely to be produced at a time of transition from one epoch to another. It reflects the clash of two views of life. Such was the situation that existed in the 16th century England. At the time, the carefully ordered and articulated medieval society was rudely shaken by the revolt of many intellectual leaders against some of the political, religious, and moral conceptions of the Middle Ages and institutions that embodied them. This conflict in society produced a similar struggle in sensitive minds, and Shakespeare's was a uniquely sensitive mind. As his career blossomed, it was the subjective drama that occupied his mind more and more and deepened his art. His views on the problems of life and the life behind can be found in the plots of his plays and flights of his poetry. Now, look about The Merchant of Venice. The Merchant of Venice. It is one of the best known and best liked comedies of Shakespeare. It marks the author's creation of a more elaborate comedy than he had designed before. Probably written in 1596, the play belongs to what is commonly called the second period of Shakespeare's writing career. During this period, Shakespeare also created the lyrical A Midsummer Night's Dream and Romeo and Juliet, apart from his historical plays. The comedy of this period is perfect in its kind and unsurpassed for the marvelous harmony it establishes among so many apparently discordant elements. The Merchant of Venice was first printed in quarto form by James Roberts on 1600. The descriptive quarto title reads, "The most excellent history of the Merchant of Venice, with the extreme cruelty of Shylock the Jew towards the said merchant, in cutting a just pound of flesh, and the obtaining of Portia by the choice of three chests." After reading the play, you can examine the validity of this description. Now know about sources of the play. The play is an amalgam of two main stories from different sources: the Cascades story and the Pound of Flesh or Bond story. Most of the plot comes from the tale of Gainito in It Pecaron the Simpleton, a collection of prose tales collected or written by an otherwise unknown writer, Sir Giovanni. The theme of the story is the winning of an otherworld bride. Shakespeare might have found another source of the play in a lost English drama called The Jew, which represents the greediness of worldly choosers and the bloody minds of users. These phrases have been taken as a loose description of the casket and pound of flesh plots, but as the Jew is no longer existent, its relation to the Merchant of Venice must remain conjectural. Shakespeare must also have been well acquainted with Marlowe's The Jew of Malta, which was by the performed at least 15 times within a year and was still being played at the Rose Playhouse. Shakespeare definitely owed to the Jew of Malta his portrayal of Shylock, but he transformed the type into a human being, still evil, but with recognizable human motives and actions. Another reason why Shakespeare decided to write a Jewish play might have been that anti-Jewish feeling had been running high at about this time and that he hoped to write a topical success. It would be an expression of his insights and at the same time a source of revenue to himself and his fellow actors. And if it is believed that Shakespeare did devise the Merchant of Venice in order to appeal to popular taste, he appears to have succeeded. It was staged a number of times and generated an absorbing topical interest. According to the title page of the first edition, the play was diverse time acted by the Lord Chamberlain, his servants, Shakespeare's own company. The first recorded performance was given in the presence of James I in 1605. The performance was a success since the king commanded a second performance the following week. Practically nothing is known about its stage history during the rest of the 17th century. At the Restoration, it was one of the plays assigned to Thomas Killigrew, but there is no record of a performance of The Merchant of Venice as written by Shakespeare. It was only in 1714 that an adaptation entitled The Jew of Venice by George Granville. Later, Lord Lansdowne took the merchant's place on the stage. But in 1714, Shakespeare's text was adapted for use in theatre. This Shylock was not a comic figure, but a bloody, vengeful villain filled with cunning and terrifying ferocity. Now, we know about the analysis. Most of the action takes place in and near Venice, a glamorous and romantic city in Italy. It was a leading port and a trade center for the whole of Europe in the 16th century. Also, it formed a vital commercial link between the eastern and western halves of the world. The other place mentioned in the play is Belmont. Portia, one of the dominating figures of the play, belongs to Belmont as Shylock. Antonio and Bassanio belong to Venice. If Venice signifies trade and commerce, Belmont stands for higher values of life like love and contentment. Now, I give you a detailed analysis of the play. Once again, I remind you to read the actual text attentively. Act first, scene first. The play takes us into the world of Shakespeare's romantic comedies, but the beginning is a little unusual. The very first scene introduces Antonio, a well-known and respectable businessman, in a state of melancholy. The play opens with Antonio commenting on himself. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me, you say it wearies you. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff it is made of, whereof it is born, I am to learn, and such I want with sadness makes of me, that I have much ado to know myself. His sadness strikes a gloomy note for the opening of a comedy. Antonio's friends, Salario and Solanio, are worried about his sadness. Salario believes that it is the anxiety about his merchant ships that weighs heavily on Antonio's mind. Solanio agrees with Celerio and pictures himself doing the same under similar circumstances. But Antonio denies it. Celerio then comments on the strange ways of nature in creating two types of temperament, two-headed Janus, one representing the grave and the other frivolous aspect of nature. Bassanio, Lorenzo, and Gratiano appear on the stage. Celario and Solanio depart, leaving Antonio with these worthier friends, while Lorenzo reminds Bassanio of their dinner time meeting. Gratiano shows his concern for Antonio's sickness. He advises him not to worry too much and endanger his respectability. Antonio calls the world a stage where everyone has a particular role to play and his part is a sad one. This stage metaphor finds expression in Shakespeare's other comedy, as you like it also. The metaphor continues, and Gratiano observes that he would prefer the inevitable wrinkles of old age to come through laughter. He would warm his liver with a wine rather than burn his heart's blood with a sigh and groans which were considered deadly. He is opposed to a person being as cold and lifeless as the marble figure of his grandfather. The speech implies that he wants to live vigorously rather than suffer from diseases like jaundice. The speech implies an intimate connection between mind and body as a physiological truth. Jaundice was attributed to melancholy or depressing emotions. Using a simile from nature, he explains the nature of gravity. A grave man is like a still stagnant pond which is covered, it means mantle, with weed and scum, it means cream. Such people assume deliberate silence and earn their reputations for wisdom and greatness like the ancient oracle. But when they open their mouth, their listeners would call them fools. Soon, Gratiano and Lorenzo leave the stage to Antonio and Bassanio. Bassanio speaks about Portia and also comments on the garrulous nature of Gratiano. Antonio asks Bassanio about the lady with whom the latter is in love. Bassanio instead tells him about his financial hardships and the imposing lifestyle which has left him in heavy debts. Antonio promises to help him to his utmost capacity. Bassanio then recalls his boyhood days when, having lost one arrow, he would shoot another identical arrow and watch it carefully. By using this method, he would retrieve the lost arrow. He narrates this tale of pure innocence, believing that by advancing second loan, Antonio might get back all his money from Bassanio. Bassanio, on being asked to come straight to the point, informs Antonio about Portia, a beautiful and rich heiress in Belmont. She is as noble as Portia, the noble wife of Brutus, a leader of the conspirators who murdered Julius Caesar. She was the daughter of Cato, the great grandson of Cato, the censor. Bassanio compares her to the golden fleece, which, according to the Greek legend, was protected by a dragon in Colchis. People thronged to secure it, but only Jason could succeed with the help of media. Similarly, many suitors flocked to Belmont to seek Portia's hand in marriage. Bassanio is sure of his success if only he can reach Belmont, since Antonio's wealth has already been invested in merchants. He asks Bassanio to try raising loan in his name. Now we come to the notes about this play. Notes: want, wit, dullard or lacking in wits. Ado, it means troubles. Argosis, it means merchant ships. Signoes, it means Italians of importance. Sandy hour or glass, an old means of time keeping. Andrew, a ship's name. Herbaril, it means the picture of vessel whose mast has fallen and rests on the sand. Nestor, it means the oldest and wisest of the Greek heroes of the Trojan. Now check your progress. Now I'll ask some questions about this play, which was we listened. Who said that Shakespeare was for all time and why? Once again, who said that Shakespeare was for all time and why? If you want to know this answer, please repeat and listen the audio. Why did Shakespeare write a Jewish play? Why did Shakespeare write a Jewish play? If you want to know this answer, again listen this audio. Then, what are the two main stories woven into the plot of Merchant of Venice? What are the two main stories woven into the plot of the Merchant of Venice? If you want to this answer, again read this audio. Next, the fourth question: how is Antonio different from his other friends? How is Antonio different from his other friends? Do you want answer? Again listen this audio. Then fifth one: which character in terms of temperament forms a contrast to Antonio? Which character in terms of temperament forms of contrast to Antonio? If you want get answer, again listen this audio. Thank you. Then another video we go to the act first and see